Boys, what's good? It's Herm. We're here today to talk about the Portland Trail Blazers and specifically Anfernee Simons, because I've been seeing a lot of rumors lately that they're open and they're willing and they're going to trade Anfernee Simons this offseason. I'm here to tell you today they should not do that. The Portland Trail Blazers should not trade Anfernee Simons. It's a horrible idea, and today we're going to get into why. But before we do, think about subscribing. It's free, it's easy. If you don't like the content, you know, it's unsubscribe later, that's fine. We're on the road to 8,000, trying to hit it soon, but let's just get into the video. Let's not mess around. So let's start off with the report. So according to Kevin O'Connor of The Ringer, I believe he said it on his podcast, The Mismatch, but it could have been the draft show too. It was one of the two. The Blazers are looking to trade the third pick and are open to trading Anfernee Simons alongside it. The team is more interested in building a contender around Damian Lillard than hitting reset and building around their great young pieces. They're looking for a star sidekick for Dame. Pascal Siakam, Mikal Bridges, and Jaylen Brown have been linked as possibilities. The harsh truth. Adding a top 20 to 40 player to a team that has missed the play-in tournament in consecutive seasons will not make this team true title contenders. Will it make them a playoff team and thus more relevant? Yeah, I think that's pretty clear. I think undoubtedly it would do that. I think if you add Siakam, Bridges, or Brown to this team, it makes them a playoff team, but it doesn't make them a contender in the West. However, a couple of seasons as a 5 to 8 seed and more relevancy is not worth sacrificing your future. Simons just turned 24 years old a couple of days ago and is already a 20-point per game scorer and an elite shooter. Feels very much like a Dame 2.0. For that reason, why sacrifice another 10 plus years of an all-star guard for 2 or 3 seasons of being slightly better than they are right now? The Blazers should just not trade him, and here's why. We're going to get into a ton of reasons. First off, they should be building for the long term. With last February's partial teardown of their roster, a new timeline was put in place. Crucial to this debate, Norman Powell and CJ McCollum were traded away to create a runway for Simons to reach his potential. It was clear to most that there was little way Portland was going to be able to contend through 2023. There were trade exceptions to use, assets to develop, other stars to become disenchanted, and draft picks to come to fruition. Shaedon Sharpe, Nasir Little, Jabari Walker, Keon, and Trenton Watford all needed time to develop and grow as a group. Yes, the Blazers are living in 2 timelines, but anyone who thought it was 2023 or bust needs to suppress the need for instant gratification if it's only for the sake of their own sanity. This team was never going to be a contender in 2023. Most people didn't even really consider them to be a playoff team going into the year. Then at the beginning of the year, they were surprisingly good. They were like the top number 1 seed in the West, or a top 3 seed in the West for like a month or two, and then things trailed off. But because of how well they played early on, I think it kind of messed with people's heads and their expectations. I don't think last season was a failure. Injuries kind of hurt the team, and they ended up with a worse record than how they really were. Secondly, Anfernee Simons he's not CJ McCollum starting off with his defense. So defense is the pretty clear and obvious concern with Anfernee Simons' game. Let's start with physical attributes though. Wikipedia lists him at 6'3". He's not. He openly said he's not sure how tall he is now. He came into the league very young out of IMG Academy and has continued to grow. I'd suggest he's closer to 6'5". If you want to look up pictures of him next to Josh Hart, who is 6'5", Simons looks just as tall or maybe even taller. Athletically, Ant and CJ are in completely different ballparks. CJ McCollum pretty much rarely gets up for dunks, but Simons is already a slam dunk champion. He has the physical attributes to be a decent defender, he just has to put it together. There was one defensive play that comes to mind for me, where Simons stayed with and stopped Bojan Bogdanovic from getting to the rim and altered his shot. Simons, of course, has to do this on a regular basis, but the ability is there. He's done it in glimpses. He just needs to do it consistently to be a good defender. Yes, it's clear that Simons isn't a good defender at the moment, but he's shown glimpses of ability and length that McCollum never could. Now let's look at his offense. Simons is not the ball stopper that CJ was. I don't begrudge McCollum for this, it's worked for a long time. But during his Portland tenure, the ball rarely left CJ's hands unless he was shooting. Simons is a willing passer. McCollum in his time with Portland was kind of like Michael Porter Jr. is right now, where all the jokes are Michael never swinged a rock Porter. It was kind of the same with CJ never swinged a rock McCollum when he was on the Blazers. He was taking a lot of shots, and when the ball hit his hands, he was going to make a move or he was going to shoot it. Simons' more versatile bag of athletic tricks also poses trickier questions to opposing defenses, and with those superior physical gifts, can wind his way and contort his body into a wider range of positions, particularly as he increases his attempts at the rim. He shoots more from 3 than McCollum. Through 36 games last year, the 23-year-old took 8 attempts from 2-point range and hit 51% of them. From behind the arc, though, he's attempting 10 shots per game, which is pretty impressive considering he's still making 38% of them. For McCollum this season, the majority of shots come from within the arc at 10.7 attempts with 44% going in, and from distance at 7.2 attempts, McCollum is logging a decent 39%. So while the percentage from 3 is slightly better, Simons is doing it on 3 more attempts per game, which is massive. But despite McCollum's penchant for 2-pointers, Simons is still getting closer to the rim more, taking 3 shots within 3 feet compared to McCollum's 2.5. So McCollum was very mid-range based, which according to analytics and basically all models is kind of the least efficient shot in the game. If you're going to take it from deeper, take a 3, and if you're going to take it from closer, take a layup. That's why the mid-range shot is kind of dying, and that's why Simons' game is kind of more well built for the modern NBA, and good passer and just a interesting offensive player that's kind of unique in the way that he plays. Simons and Lillard need time together. People aren't going to like to hear this, but honestly, I'm kind of the board that they shouldn't trade either guy, but we'll get into what it could look like if they trade one of them a little bit later. Simons and Dame have started only 54 games together. It's like 2/3 of a season. And while some of you might say, so what, they've been teammates for 4 years. I'd say this team looks decently different to previous seasons in the past. I think it's 5 years now. That's coming off the top of my head. But these guys have been together for a while, but it's a much different team. It's a much different kind of role for Simons, and it's just not the same. The starting backcourt needs to be given the same time to mesh as its predecessor had. Yes, Dame is 33, but the team has already been more conservative with his workload, preserving his body. He was playing a career low 35 minutes per game. He suffered 2 relatively minor calf injuries this year, which kept him out for a dozen games, and reportedly, the team sat him a little longer than they would have in the past. Simons was 23 last year, a year younger than McCollum when he was thrust into a starting role next to Dame. The pair needs time to acclimate and work out each other's rhythms. If there are still issues in February next year at the deadline, then we can start to worry about maybe breaking the two up. But in his own right, Simons has been a star without Damian Lillard. In 11 games without Dame last season, Simons stepped right into his role. He averaged 29 points and 6 assists per game on 46, 41, 94 splits. Very, very good. He looks like a real star player. And at only 24 years old this upcoming season, he feels like a player primed for many All-Star appearances in the future. The team did only go 4-7 with Simons and not Dame, but he was still a positive plus-minus in those games, and the team would be adding pieces around him in a deal for Dame, as well as this year's 3rd pick. So even though the team was losing, they were better than the other teams when Simons is on the floor. So if you add better pieces around him with a Dame trade, with Brandon Miller, whoever is the 3rd pick, with Shaedon Sharpe continuing to develop, that plus minus with him on the floor will just continue to go up because the surrounding cast will be more beneficial. The future is bright with Simons. You don't need to trade Simons to have a bright future or a bright now, it's bright with him there. This team is not lacking young talent, and if they decided to rebuild it, could be a very short and successful rebuild because the team already has good young talent. This team has Anfernee Simons, 21 points per game, 4 assists, 45, 38, 89 splits last year, and again 29 and 6 without Damian Lillard. Sharpe in his last 10 games last year averaged 24 points per game and 6 rebounds, and when given the opportunity, when given the minutes, looked really productive. A lot of people would have Sharpe as the highest upside guy on this team right now, and he does have a very bright future, and I'd probably agree. Cam Reddish in his first 10 games of the team before they started tanking averaged 14 points per game and 3 rebounds, and just was a productive player. I'd say it's the best we've seen Reddish look outside of there were a couple stretches with the Hawks where he looked pretty impressive, but Cam Reddish was solid with the Blazers after basically getting DNPs with the Knicks all the time. Skylar Mays in a short stretch towards the end of the season averaged 15 points per game, 8 assists, and 50, 46, 92 splits. Obviously, those stats aren't replicable, and I wouldn't say that they are, but Mays could be a guy that gives you 10 points and like 5 assists per game on slightly lower efficiency. It feels like they found a gem in him, and I was actually pretty impressed. They'll have the third pick, which will probably either be Brandon Miller or Scoot Henderson, and they'll have a young star received for Dame in a trade that's like that. So they have a ton of young talent on the team, a ton of good young players, and just pieces that make sense to build around and to go forward with as a rebuild, rather than trying desperately to win something with Dame that'll probably never happen. In conclusion, do not trade Anfernee Simons. Just repeating all the key points here. Adding a top 20 to 40 player to a team that has missed a play-in tournament in consecutive years will not make this team title contenders. Let me say it again. Making that move, trading Simons in the third pick, will not make this team contenders. No matter how much the front office wants to convince themselves of that, one trade like that is not going to make you a contender. Simons, who's already a 20 point per game scorer, you're losing all that scoring, and you're losing the talent and upside of the third pick. So while you maybe get a guy back who's a 25 to 30 point per game scorer, I just don't think the value is really there, and I don't think it's going to make the team significantly better. It might make them slightly better, but it will not make them significantly better. Anfernee Simons is not CJ McCollum offensively or defensively, so I don't think you really have to worry about the same shortcomings of that duo of McCollum and Dame as you do with Simons and Dame. Don't kind of hurt the now by what happened in the past. Just because Dame and CJ didn't work out doesn't mean Dame and Ant can't. Simons and Lillard need time. Again, only 54 starts together, and they've been good together. They just need more time. Simons has also been a star without Dame, so if you're going to trade one of them, I would argue you should trade the 33-year-old rather than the 24-year-old budding star. And the team is not lacking young talent. And if they decided to rebuild, again, it could be a very short and successful one because of all the nice, interesting young pieces that this team has and what they can do. In terms of young talent in the Western Conference, this team is up there in those rankings, especially if they keep the third pick and Simons. A kind of core of Simons, Sharpe, and Miller, I think is better than what the Rockets have. It's probably not better than what the Spurs have just because they have Wemby now, but it's a more clear future than a ton of teams towards the bottom of the Western Conference. Probably more clear than what the Jazz are doing right now. It would be more clear than what teams in the middle are doing as well, whether it's the Mavs, who knows what's going on there. But it just feels like the future would be so bright, and I don't understand the point of breaking it up for a couple seasons of being slightly better. I just don't see the upside that a trade has like that to make this team a contender, but I see the clear upside that Simons has to be a star in the NBA. And if you have a guy like that, you don't just move him. It feels like people are drastically undervaluing how good Simons is because they're talking about it like Sharpe is off limits, and Sharpe's upside is super high, but Simons has shown us how good he's already been, and it's clear he has much more to go. So why Simons is not also off limits is very confusing to me and just doesn't make sense, because this dude is special. If you're looking at the best young guards guards in the league, Simons is up there. He's very high. Yet we're treating it like he's just some other guy, like just some random dude, some future role player that you can trade for a nice other piece. Simons is a future star. He's a guy that you build a team around, and he's a guy that you keep because he's the next Damian Lillard for this team. He's the next perennial all-star guard, and he's a guy that's super gifted and is not one you just give away for 2 or 3 seasons of being the 5th to 8th seed. It doesn't make sense. You shouldn't do that, and I think if the front office does, it will make them look very stupid very soon. But let me know your thoughts on it. I know that was kind of harsh at the end there, but again, I just think moving Simons would be awful and stupid and dumb. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on it. Let me know what you think the Blazers should do. I think they should rebuild. I know there will be some people that think they should try to contend. I just don't see a clear path to that. I see a much more clear path of Simons being an all-star. So if it's me, I'm keeping him. Let me know your thoughts down below. Think about subscribing again on the road to 8,000. Trying to hit that by like the 20th of this month. Hopefully we can get there. Subs has slowed down a little bit, but we're still grinding out here. So hopefully you enjoyed. That's going to be it for me today. Again, think about liking, commenting, subbing, but that's going to be it. Have a good rest of your day. Peace.